As I said, my name is Steve Felstead, and I am a certified financial planner. I happen to work for Deseret Mutual, which is the church's benefit administration company. So my assignment is to come down to BYU, and I was here today, and I meet with about 4,000 people, not all at the same time, but I'm the financial planner for technically every employee at BYU. And it's a free service, and there's no commissions or sales involved in it. So as you can imagine, it's really a going concern when you're not charging anything for that service. But it's a wonderful job, and I love being involved in this class. We're sponsored in part by the Marriott School. I want to thank Cheryl Macbeth, who's kind of hiding in the corner for all of her support. And I also want to thank those of you that are members of Bryan Sudweeks' class, the mentors. Would you please stand up? There should be about 10 of you with the lanyards on. Look around. Okay. Oh boy, there's more mentors than non-mentors here tonight. So I think the fact that we have you can sit down now. These are students that are, I understand, not only advanced in the class, but also if they come to do this mentorship, they don't have to write a paper or something like that, so they're kind of here under duress. Is that right? That's what I'm told anyway. So they're here to help answer questions, and we're going to have 2 sessions, one on investing and one on taxes tonight. We'll have breaks after each one, and you'll be able to ask questions, and we'll have the mentors come down, and they can answer as many questions as they can, and then Kim and I will field other questions. Kim Gardner is here. She's seated. She'll introduce herself in a minute for the second module, and that's how we'll run the evening. We'll be through at 8:30, and maybe a little later than that if you want to stick around for questions. My task tonight is to talk to you about investments. It's kind of formidable since I understand we have a number of members of the investment banking club here, and I'm sure that you're going to take me on and ask me a lot of technical questions that I can't answer. So I've got this little bit of fear and trepidation going, but I'll do my best. So you can ask questions if you want during the presentation. If it starts to run too long, I'll probably ask you to hold them at the end, but let's see how it goes. And so on that note, let's begin. Can everyone hear me okay? We're good? Okay, great. Thank you. We're going to talk tonight about investing and savings. As I said, we're going to talk about different perspectives, kind of the behavioral part of saving and investing. There's always a behavioral dimension of finance. They say that there are no financial problems, there are only behavioral problems that masquerade themselves as financial problems. So we're going to talk a little bit about perspectives on investing, and then we'll talk about the basics and then steps to investing. So let's talk spirituality for a minute. Money teaches gospel principles. I believe that in my own life. You have to understand a little bit about my background. I'm basically an accountant by training, and I haven't been a financial planner for more than about 5 years. Before that, I was in finance and worked mostly in that field. So I am the ultimate left-brainer. Okay, I'm the ultimate budgeter. In fact, my wife once told me that she said, "Steve, if you could budget for lawnmower repairs every month, you do it at that level of detail." And she was right. And so I'm really retentive when it comes to budgeting, and I have a big security gland. They say that women usually have a security gland in marriage, but I'm the one that has it in my marriage. And my wife isn't anything like me at all. In fact, she doesn't even balance her checkbook. And so one of the things that we've had to reconcile is this financial thing. And as I think of the sacrifices I've made here, it says, money is a tool to teach us many things, including the principles of sacrifice, discipline, law of the harvest, and work. And I've had to sacrifice some of my desire for security and some of my retentiveness to make our marriage work. And in fact, if she ever watches this, she'll say, "Steve, you're probably not all the way there yet, probably as far as you need to be." So I believe that. I think that money teaches us a lot of life skills and disciplines, particularly with respect to our spouse. And you know, one reason I love my job as a financial planner for the LDS Church is that if I can get people financially independent and off serving in some capacity early in life, I feel like there's such a value added to that for the kingdom and for me personally. And so President Benson said, "The Lord desires His saints to be free and independent in the critical days ahead." And that's what I'm really trying to do personally, is to get people financially independent. You are really to be commended for coming to this class now, early on in your marriage, when you have time on your side and when you can hopefully avoid a lot of the problems that can come about as a result of not understanding personal finance in a marriage. And I commend you for that. I think it's wonderful that you're here and really grateful that you are. Let's talk about investing. Is investing the same as savings? No, it's not. It's not. Savings is setting the money aside, right? That's the first thing you have to do, and that's kind of an integral part of investing, because the first thing that makes you a successful investor is setting some money aside. But investing is actually putting the money that you set aside to work. And so there's some rules of thumb. You've heard about rules of thumb in all walks of life, and we certainly have them in financial planning. But some of the rules of thumb are that your savings level depends upon how essentially financially independent will become later on in life. So rules of thumb are under 4%, 4 or under, there's a high risk that you're not going to make it, that you won't retire well, that you may have to be the greeter at Walmart, or the person that's taking orders at McDonald's late in life. 5 to 9%, there's a better probability that you'll ultimately be able to retire and become financially independent, but you may be living paycheck to paycheck, and inflation may gobble you up eventually. 10 to 20, that's the zone in which typically you might have a comfortable lifestyle and become financially independent. It depends a lot on how soon you start doing it. And you'll see evidence of that in a little while. One of the basics is that budgeting is really the key to saving and investing, because that's the discipline that once you master that, that's what gets you in the game early and allows you to continue to contribute consistently throughout your career. So budgeting is really, I think, the foundation of all financial successes. And I know you got a lot of that in Module 1, and I believe in that wholeheartedly. Inflation is an interesting phenomenon. You know that, and this just says $1 million today is worth $344,000 in 35 years at 3% inflation. Inflation has historically actually been a little bit north of 3%. And when we do financial plans, we model healthcare, which is a big part of anybody's budget, at 6%. And that's been the trend in healthcare, and we see that in the foreseeable future. So inflation is really important, and you'll see how it plays into certain investments that you might make, like cash and CDs, and there's a term, going broke slowly, that I'll probably use eventually later on in the forecast. The rule of 72 is an interesting rule. How many of you have heard of the rule of 72? A lot of you have. Okay, so if you divide the number of years that you plan to save and invest into 72, that tells you the interest rate that you need to invest at in order for that money to double. And the converse is true. If you divide the interest rate into 72, it tells you how many years you have to save to have the money to double. And your goal as a saver and investor is to have that money double as many times as you can before you retire, because that's the power of compound interest. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So all that rule of 72 is really trying to communicate is just start early and get in the game early and have that money double, because that's the exponential growth that you can get from actually starting the game. A little something about risk, and I think you'll find this pretty entertaining. If I can key it up, trigger it off here with the hand. Okay. I can't believe that anybody would take a risk like that. Can you? I mean, it's just phenomenal. So anyway, risk is a big, big deal in investing. And it has to do with, we'll talk more about it, but it has to do with taking risk at certain appropriate times of your life during the investment, while you're making your investments. You want to take moderate to more aggressive amounts of risk early on in the process. And then as you get closer to needing the money, you want to take less risk. But understanding the risk that you're taking when you make investments, no matter what they are, be it mutual funds or diversified mutual funds or single stocks or single bonds, is really, really critical to this whole investment process. Let me give you an example of starting early. Can I blow through the slide? No, I didn't. Okay. So you may have seen this comparison. This little comparison is for two people that the one is named Bill, and Bill started at age 25. He gets a 7% return throughout his life. He invests $4,500 a year for 10 years. So in 10 years, he's got $45,000 invested. He stops contributing at age 35, and at that time he has $62,174 in his account, having earned 7% during that 10-year period. But he doesn't contribute another dime after 35. And when he's 60, he has $337,445 in his account. So remember, he made investments for 10 years, made contributions for 10 years, and then stopped. Okay, there's another individual named Phil who is 25, but he waits 10 years to start investing and actually starts when Bill stops. He invests the same $4,500 for 25 years. And so he's actually invested $112,500 contributions compared to Bill's $45,000. But at age 60, he has a fair amount less than the guy that started early. Okay? Why is that? What's the secret there? Compound interest is what I'm hearing. Albert Einstein made the comment that compound interest is a more important force in the universe than fusion. And I think, I don't know, I'm not a good enough physicist to debate that, but you understand the concept there, where investing early, you start to earn interest on the interest, and it's just it's essentially a never-ending process. And so the idea here is you want to get started early. As a financial planner, it's very interesting to see what happens. A lot of people that we work with really don't even wake up to the fact that they need to retire someday till they're in their late 40s or early 50s. And oftentimes they haven't been in the 401k plan long enough, they haven't contributed a high enough percentage, and now they're almost in a position where they can't do it. They can't make up the time. They don't have enough time to really accumulate the amount of retirement savings that they need to retire. So again, having a plan, starting early, developing a budget, and contributing to your retirement, when it's proper to do so, is really, really important. So starting early, the time value of money, very, very important aspect of investing. Have you ever had anybody ask you whether or not an IRA was a good investment? Have you ever had anybody ask that question? Is an IRA a good investment? Okay. What's wrong with that statement? What's wrong with that question?
Not investment.
It's not an investment. That's right. And an IRA is an account type or a plan. And so we call it the shopping cart. Okay, it's the basket that carries your investments. And often people are confused about that. When you invest, you have to make two basic fundamental decisions. First of all, you have to decide upon the account type or the plan. And then once you've decided on that, you have to decide on how to actually position your money in the marketplace. The variables on plan type might be the tax treatment of that particular plan, who sponsors it, or it could also be the amount that you can contribute to it each year. What we have listed here, and I won't try the laser because I'm afraid, well, let's see. Okay, so see in this column, these are all qualified retirement types of investments. So they're tax qualified. There's some tax advantages to invest in one of these four account types. A regular bank account would be a non-qualified account. And so, again, I'm not going to go into the details of what all these accounts are about. That would take too much time. But just remember, if anybody asks you if an IRA is a good investment, the answer is it's not an investment, it's an account type. I'll talk a little bit more about account type versus investments and differentiate between those two. That's an important concept for you to have. The groceries are the actual investment vehicles that you're using. How you have your money actually in the market. And so the most common investments are cash, and you probably all have a money market account, and you might even have an internet money market account. You probably all have a checking account. A mutual fund is another kind of investment. There's a definition of what a mutual fund is later on, so I'll wait till we get to that. But a mutual fund is another way to invest your money, not an account type of investment. And so these are the most common investments for young couples starting out. And then later on, individual bonds, individual stocks, and real property. And I will make this comment right now that most of us will never get to the later on phase of life in terms of investment sophistication. In fact, I have never invested in an individual bond or stock, and I've made some bad real estate investments, and so I've been burned on that one. And I don't ever intend to invest in individual stocks or bonds. And I'm a financial planner, but I don't know enough about the industries and the companies to want to do that. Some of you will, and some of you will have that knowledge. But for most people will always just be in mutual funds, and they'll diversify that way and keep their investments in that manner. So those are the investments, and then remember the account types are the Roth, IRA, 401ks, and all those kinds of other plans. So let's talk about some of the cash management vehicles that you might invest in. So if you're investing for things like down payments on a house, or money to get married on in a few years, or money to pay some tuition on, you want that money to be very low risk. You want it to be liquid. You don't want it to be in the market per se in something more risky, because you could have a value that would be quite a bit down by the time you need it. And so you'd be looking at cash management vehicles like savings accounts or CDs or money market accounts. They're low risk and they're predictable. As I said, they're ideal for short-term goals. They do have long-term risk due to inflation. So I met with a lady 1 hour before I came here who had about $70,000 in just in money markets. And she didn't need all that $70,000 to be in money markets. And if she keeps them in money markets, earning 0.3 or 0.5, and inflation's going along at 3%, that money's not going to be worth very much in 20 years. And so we need to get her into something where she's taking a little bit of risk and earning a better return, something better than inflation. So there's this term, go broke slowly. You can't just stay in money markets all your life, but there are reasons to have those kinds of investments. And so in these kinds of situations, you need to know what the fees are, and maturities have more to do with CDs than money market accounts. CDs are instruments, it's called a certificate of deposit, that have a set period where there's a guaranteed interest rate, and then they roll over. And if you get out of that CD early on, there's a 90-day interest penalty on it. So you need to know if they're in CDs, what the maturity date is, and what the interest rate is, and so on. And you need to know what the interest rates are. If you go, and I'll just say this, if you go to Zions Bank, you're going to get about 0.3 on a money market account. If you open up an internet money market account, 0.5 or 0.6. There are some online money market accounts, internet money market accounts that you can get for a little more than that. There's a website called bankrate.com. By the way, if you want to check out rates and see what's available, that's a really good website, kind of the standard in the industry. And that's about what you're looking at, really. Oh, there are some new checking accounts now that pay 2%. On balances under about, I can't remember the number.
25,000.
25,000, thank you. And that, to me, that may be a teaser rate, meaning that may be something that they're going to phase out of when they get enough penetration into their bank. Because they want to get you hooked on it. They want you to get you in there with a checking account. That's their goal, is to get you there. But that's something to look at, too, and that's a fairly new thing. Thank you for mentioning the ceiling on that. I don't know what banks offer. My own credit unions, I think, do some of it. But, so that's kind of short-term investing for things like tuition that you're saving up for, down payments on a home, And I would say kind of expenses that are maybe approximate within about 5 years, that you really need that liquidity. Mutual funds. I'm going to back up. Mutual funds are an interesting phenomenon. Mutual funds have really dominated the saving and retirement industry. I think there's something like 7,000 or 8,000 different mutual funds. If you go to Morningstar and start to look at that, there's a number of them. What a mutual fund is it's a company that agrees to invest in a certain mandate. For example, it might be large company growth stocks, or it might be intermediate term bonds, or it might be small company value stocks. So there's an investment mandate. This company has experts that specialize in that particular mandate, and they will go out and pick 200 or 300 companies that meet that investment mandate and try to manage within, we call it the space, within that space to try to get the most return they can with the least amount of volatility for a particular investment mandate. And that's what you do. And so if you think about it, you have instant diversification if you invest in a mutual fund rather than one single stock. You can pick, Apple, or you could pick a mutual fund that indexes the Standard & Poor's 500. So there's 500 large cap companies in that mutual fund, the S&P 500, and you'd have a lot more diversification because if one of those companies doesn't grow or goes belly up, you haven't lost much. But if Apple goes belly up, it's a bad example, by the way, isn't it, Apple? But in this context, but if Apple goes belly up, we've lost everything. So in an average retirement portfolio, DMBA, you have 13 different mutual funds that typically your assets are allocated over, and each one of those mutual funds might have, 500 or even more than that companies in it. So you're very, very, very diversified that way, and that's why mutual funds, I think, are so useful and helpful in investment scenarios like retirement. They're typically used for intermediate or long-range goals. So that's kind of the standard for 401k plans, for IRAs, those retirement types of savings plans. They vary greatly in fees and how they're taxed, and loads. Loads are sales commissions. So if you go to a mutual fund and you buy A shares or B shares, A shares you're going to pay a commission going in, and B shares you're going to pay a commission coming out. So you want to be sure that you understand what commissions you're paying. Mutual funds have what are called expense ratios. The expense ratio is the fee that every mutual fund charges for that particular fund. And they vary quite a bit. A lot of the mutual funds are indexed. And so the S&P 500 index might cost, I'm going to use the term basis points, maybe I shouldn't use that term, but 1/10 or 1/2% of 1%. That might be that's 15 basis points, 10 or 15 basis points. That would be the fee on that fund. That would be for an index fund where the manager is just trying to replicate an index like the S&P 500. If you bought a small cap growth fund that was actively managed, meaning that you have a staff of people now that are picking small cap growth stocks, the expense ratio on that fund might be 160 basis points, or 1.6% of the account balance per year. And so the fees vary widely, and you need to look at what the expense ratios are. You need to look at management fees. If you have a managed account, some companies will charge a percent to just manage your money. And so in investing in mutual funds, you'll want to look at fees, you want to look at loads, and you want to look obviously at the investment mandate or the strategy for that fund, and then you also want to look at history, performance history. And I don't think you ought to look any less than about 10 years as a general rule, because performance under 10 years is usually kind of a victim of the current economic cycle we're in, and certain kinds of funds do a lot better in different economic cycles, so you kind of want to look out longer to take a look at fund performance. Questions about mutual funds? Okay. So before you start investing, you have to answer yes to these 4 questions. Okay, are your priorities in order, and are you square with the Lord? So you don't want to make investing a higher priority than your responsibilities to our Heavenly Father. And that's, I don't think you're going to be a very successful investor if you don't. And I don't say that because that means you're going to get a big return on your money. I say that because I think that if you're paying your tithes and offerings, I think you're going to be more conscious of where your money's going. And I think that's really the benefit, the one benefit you get from that, is you're sharper when it comes to investing and saving and knowing where your money is. And that's a material, kind of a corporeal advantage to paying tithing. So that's the first one. Do you have adequate life and health insurance? A lot of people overlook health insurance and life insurance before they start investing. There's a whole module on this next week, and so you'll understand some of the risks of being uninsured. There's nothing worse than sitting across the desk from a recently widowed woman, and we do this probably 3-4 times a year. In fact, I just worked with one, lost her husband in November, and he had hardly any life insurance. And this woman has got another 10 years to work, and she's going to have to work every bit of that 10 years. And the good news for her is the kids are at the house, so she can work. But you strand a wife that has childcare responsibility and income earning responsibility without much life insurance, and that person will be in a world of hurt. So pay attention to life insurance. Be sure that you have enough, especially when you start having children. And you'll learn more about that next week. And health insurance, there can be just catastrophic problems with not having appropriate health insurance that can wipe you out. So be sure you have those in place. And then you ought to know your personal goals and be living on a budget and have a plan. And there are some written investment plans that you can look at that talk more about, what kind of risk you're going to take and when you're going to take it, how much you're going to set aside, and those kinds of things. Actually, Bryan has one on his website here, this investment plan example that I'd encourage you to look at. You ought to have an emergency fund. And that emergency fund ought to be between 3 and 6 months of living expenses. And not ought to be in cash or in a money market account, something that's available to you at a moment's notice. And that ought to be a high priority for you. Fortunately, not many of you have very high living expenses right now, I would hope. And so the 3 to 6 months kind of depends on how stable your situation is. And if you're in school and not earning an income and so on, you probably can get by with 3 because you don't have a lot of income risk. It is kind of what it is. And maybe somebody has a part-time job and they're living off of that. But that ought to be the first thing that you have. And then short-term investments only. And you can put it in a money market fund because you're not going to have very much in there, and you can get that at any time you want. And that's probably where I'd put it if I were you. Then you got to have some food storage. There's a great website, providentliving.org, that helps you understand how to do that. And you start kind of small and you build 72-hour kit, and then you start kind of building gradually. And that's the next thing that is really wise and good counsel from our prophet. And then you ought to be budgeting and understanding how much you can save. And here's this kind of rule of thumb again that was quoted at the beginning of the class: 10% for your tithing and then 10 to 20% for yourself. So 70 to 80% add to your budget. And so then you want to kind of prioritize your goals. And typically, the emergency fund would be the first thing you want to establish. And then you may want to pay off your debt. Now, if you have consumer debt, then you clearly want to pay that off. Consumer debt means credit cards, or store cards, or signature loans. Hope nobody has a payday loan. You know what the interest rate on a payday loan is? Anybody know? 500% APR. Yeah. Because you take your check in, they discount by some percentage, okay? They give you, maybe $80 on a $100 check. And then so most of the people pay them back. And every 2 weeks, if you keep turning that over, if you're in the habit of doing that every 2 weeks or so, it works out to be about 500% a year. on payday loan. The highest consumer credit rate I've seen recently is on a Home Depot card. That was about 26%. And those cards are kind of funny. Sometimes they have no interest for a while, but if you don't pay the interest off within about 9 months, then they hit you with a whole past due balance plus this 25% rate. And I've seen people carry that balance at that rate on a card. I've seen people with $100,000 worth of debt, 60,000 consumer and 40,000 student loans. I've seen people so hurting, so upside down that it's just, you can't imagine it. And there's really no way out for a lot of these people other than bankruptcy, and then their credit's messed up for, many years. So I digress, but I want you to really watch consumer credit. If you have any of that, you clearly have to pay that off first because you're not going to earn that much on any kind of investment that you could make. So that'll be your first priority, is emergency fund. Paying off student loans is another, I think, fairly high priority given the interest rates around 6 to 8%. Some of you can't do that right away. There are, if you have very low income, there's income-based repayment on student loans where you can get a little bit of a break on that. And so that's probably a higher priority than investing long-term. I don't think it's a higher priority than an emergency fund, but it's probably a higher priority than investing long-term. If you're in a 401k plan and you're out in the workforce now and you're getting a match on that, you would want to capture that match and pay off your student loans at the same time if you could. You don't want to let the match go away. Y'all understand what a match is on a 401k? And I'm watching the time here. But if you don't look at time, if you're out working, most employers will offer a 401k plan if they're large enough to be able to do that. The church offers a 401k plan. There's a 6% match on a 6% contribution. So if you save 6% of your salary, they'll match that with 6%. And so in hardly any circumstances do you want to let that go, because it's 6% free money. It's 100% return on your investment, going into your account. And that's how you get this 12% thing rolling for you, as you're starting to save for retirement. You're bringing 6 and somebody's matching it at that level. So you don't want to let that go. And so somehow figure out a way to do that and pay off your student loans if you can. Don't let the match go. But you want to pay off the student loans. Then you want to save for a specific purpose. You may be saving for a down payment. That's probably your next priority. And so you want to save for that, and probably capture the match and save a little bit for a down payment. And then retirement savings comes last. And I think once you capture the match in your 401k, then I would put college admission funds ahead of retirement savings. Once you get that rolling, and you feel like you're on track to do that, then go back and increase your contribution to your 401k higher than the match. And that's typically the way I ask people or suggest people prioritize their savings. So you got to have priorities. You got to kind of think about how you're saving for what and where it goes. Okay, that's why you need priorities. What characteristics do you need? You need to understand again the time horizon for the investment. The time horizon for a down payment. Maybe you want to get into a house in 5 years, and so you kind of work out how much you have to save to have a down payment sufficient to get the house that you think you can afford. You might have a 30-year time horizon. I deal with time horizons all the time. Investment time horizons, all the time. I'll do a financial plan for somebody that's 65 years old, and I look at their plan, and I get a projection, and it tells me they don't need their money until they're 70 and a half. And for you older folks, I see a couple of us here in the room, that's the year in which the government makes you start to take distributions from your 401k. So if I do a plan and I see that you don't need that money until 70 and a half, and you're 65, you've got a 15-year investment horizon. So I'm going to position your money more like 80-20. And I'm going to say keep an 80% stocks and 20% bonds until you have about less than 12 years, and then get to 60% bonds, and 60% stock and 40% bonds. And I'm going to gauge your asset allocation based upon your time horizon. So it becomes very, very important. And for you young guys and gals, you will just be saving at a very aggressive rate probably when you first start, because you've all got 30 or 40-year time horizons for retirement. But you don't have that kind of time horizon for a down payment. And you don't have that kind of that time horizon for saving for kids' college. So that's the time horizon part of it, and you'll understand that. And hopefully get some help from people that can help you understand what that is and how to invest. So we talked about risk tolerance. People are funny and they have different tolerance for risk, and a lot of times I will have, part of the financial planning I do will involve someone taking a risk tolerance test. It tells me how risk prone or risk averse they are. And I'll factor that in. And so if they're very risk averse and they need to be in about 20%, about 80% stocks that are going to be fairly volatile, I might caution them about that. Either I'm going to tell them you either need to stop being so risk averse, or we might temper that so you're not quite as volatile. If you can't sleep at night, you know, it's no fun to be investing in something very volatile. If you can't sleep and you're going to worry about it for 30 to 40 years. So typically you start out aggressively for retirement, you get more moderate as you get closer to retirement. And when you're in retirement taking distributions, then you want to be ultra conservative. And that's the discussion for another day, and I won't go there yet. Type of account to use, again, tax qualified accounts. The retirement accounts are very restricted in terms of when you can get your money out. Basically, it's 59.5 before you can touch that money without a 10% penalty. And so you have to be aware of that. The one really notable exception to that, and a great way to save, I think, is in a Roth IRA, by the way, because in a Roth IRA, you can get the principal out anytime you want for any reason with no penalty on it, even if you're under 59.5. So that is a really valuable way to save for, I think, for college admissions. You can save for college at a 529, but you can't pay for admissions at a 529, and for weddings at a 529, but you can in a Roth 401k. A lot of times when I get young people that I'm counseling with, we'll take a look at a 529 plan, which is a college savings plan, versus a Roth IRA. I'm sorry if I'm using 401k. I shouldn't be using the term 401k. If I said that earlier, erase it. Roth IRA is the one that you can give principal out anytime without any penalty and for any reason. So what counseling would decide is a Roth IRA a better way to save for those kinds of things, or is a 529 plan a better way to save. So now we're talking about account type, and that's a very important consideration. And then the value of after-tax and before-tax savings. Anything that has the term Roth associated with it means that you're saving money that you pay the taxes on. And so the taxes are cleansed. You know, the money that's in there will never be taxed again when it comes out. And then a Roth account, if you keep the account open for more than 5 years, the interest is not taxed either when it comes out. That's the beauty of the Roth account. So if you're a seminary teacher and you've got 5 kids and you're making $60,000 a year, what am I going to tell you to save in? A Roth, exactly. And why? Because you're not paying any taxes. You know, you're not paying a dime. You've got 4 or 5 child tax credits, and you've got hardly any money. You know, so you're not paying any federal taxes. And so you want to save in that Roth because you're getting that money in there tax-free anyway. And then when it comes out, there's no tax on it. Now, if you're older and you've got, you know, you're making $100 a quarter, and most of the kids are out of the house, then you typically want to save before tax. Because if you save before tax, the money isn't taxed when it goes in, it's taxed when it comes out. So you can save more money that way. And it's more important to worry about saving money than it is worrying about the tax treatment. Although there are some people, and I know one individual in particular, who's always saved Roth his whole career, and he's my age, and he just believes the tax rates are going to be higher when he takes it out, and that's possible. So again, just the before tax, after tax things, and it's kind of as a general rule. If you're not paying very much tax and you're saving a 401k, saving the Roth to begin with, and then go eventually to before tax. Okay, who are you going to invest it with? Step 3. Have you ever heard the quote? There's a guy named Abraham Maslow. Do you know who he is? Okay. The quote I like from him the very best is, "He who is good with a hammer thinks everything is a nail." Have you heard that? You watch that, how much that applies to life in general. And so I'll apply it to investment counseling and advice. There are a lot of well-intentioned people that are selling investments. There are also some very unscrupulous people that are selling investments, okay, but I won't go there. I'll go with the well-intentioned. But they may only understand one investment product, like life insurance, or like annuities. And they think everything is a nail. They think that every conceivable situation in life can be solved by that one product. And the fact is that it can't. And so you have to be careful because some people just have a very narrow focus. That's why a certified financial planner is good, because a certified financial planner takes a more holistic approach and you understand more of the broad markets for investments. And some of them don't even work on a fee, or rather on a commission. And commissions also can drive a lot of people to sell investments that they shouldn't be selling to people because they're not appropriate for them. And there's some very high commissions on certain investment products, like 5 or 10% up front, and then a trailing commission on the back end. So if the person only sells one product, that's a chance that they may think everything is a nail. If they don't have credentials like a CFP, Certified Financial Planner, CFA is a Certified Financial Analyst. That's what a lot of the people that are actually investment professionals have. Very difficult to obtain. I mean, that's a really, if you have one of those, you're really knowledgeable. That would be a good credential to have, of course, a CPA. Securities licenses are licenses that people have to sell certain securities. They're not considered credentials. It means that they typically just know something about their product, but it's not necessarily they would have a broad brush of what the market is all about. So I would consider that a credential. You want to know how they're compensated. Are they getting a big upfront commission? Are they getting trailing commissions? What are they? How much experience do they have? Do they have references? And then, as we talked earlier, what are the expenses for the investment? All good questions to ask before you select someone to actually invest with. We often recommend these no-load mutual fund companies for people that are investing outside of the 401k. These are the largest three. I don't know if you've heard of, probably you've all heard of Fidelity because they advertise a lot. Vanguard is another one, T. Rowe Price is another one. These are all large mutual fund companies that don't charge commissions and they have low expense ratios on their funds. And so very often we will recommend that people go to one of these places to invest for retirement or to invest longer term. Now, they also have money market accounts, but these are, would be for longer term retirement types of investments that weren't part of the 401k plan. So, step 4, get the match and automate your program in investing. This is kind of a busy slide, first of all, we talked about the match too, the match on a 401k plan. You can also get, on a 529 plan, if you work for BYU, you can get a deduction from your payroll check, which is great. You can also go to the bank and get an ACH, automated clearinghouse, transfer into an account. So you can do that so that it comes out of your bank account automatically every month. If you can do that, that's advisable, because that kind of forces this discipline on you to be able to save a certain amount, per month, and that's a good thing to do. I'm going to tell you, in looking at this slide, I'm going to tell you the 4 ordinal priorities in investing. And I'm going to refer to just parts of this slide. I hope you can remember this, because this is an important lesson to learn, and there's not really a slide on this. So we tell people there's 4 things to do in investing that will make you successful in this order. The first one is how much you're saving. Okay, that's a big one, because if you're not saving very much, you're not going to have very much, when you need the money. So it's the contribution rate that you're saving. Okay. The second one is investor behavior. That is, I'm pointing to the screen, but that doesn't help you, does it? I apologize. That talks about, let's see. There's somewhere in here where it talks about, I can't read the darn thing, about not timing the market. Right, stick to your guns. Okay. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit about investor behavior. There's a study done by a firm called Dalbar. They study the stock market and they publish a report every year. The last one they published was December 31st of 2011. And it compared the average investor in stocks to the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is the broad market index for large cap stocks. During that 20-year period, it's a 20-year period ending December 31st, 2011, the average investor got 3.49% on average. The S&P 500 got 7.81%. Okay? Does that surprise you? You know why that is? Anybody have a clue why that's the case? Why?
Because the majority of the returns happen on 10 days in the market.
Because they're just in the market a short time and they come out. They're timing the market. Let me explain how it happens in my world. You have these people that get 401k statements, and they look at their statement, and the market's up. Okay, it's been up for maybe 18 months, and their account balance is higher. They judge that by how high their account balance is compared to what it was. So they say, oh my gosh, this must be great. You know, I need to start contributing more to this 401k, and I need to get into a more aggressive investment portfolio. Let's say it's an 80% stock, 20% bond portfolio. So they do that, and then a couple of years later, they look at their statement, and now the market's down. And they think, oh, this is terrible. You know, I ought to be in gold, or I ought to do something else. So they stop contributing to their 401k, and they get into something really conservative. Maybe they'll go to all money markets in their 401k. So over their lifetime, as those cycles go up and down, they're buying high and selling low. Buying high, selling low. They do it time and time again. And investing is really counterintuitive. They say never do anything when you're despondent or when you're exuberant. And people, because they follow their intuition, they often shoot themselves in the foot in investing. So what you want to do is you want to stay in the market. Buy and hold. Stick to your strategy. If you've got 30 years to invest, you're going to go through different market cycles. And there's going to be downs and there's going to be ups. But you stay in that particular asset allocation until you get close to retirement. So first one's saving. Second one is behavior. Third one is actually asset allocation. And that's being an appropriate mix of stocks and bonds based upon your investment horizon. And the last one is fund selection. So what that's saying is it doesn't matter so much what mutual fund you pick. And I'm not disparaging that decision, but what matters most is how much you save, what your behavior is, and how your assets are allocated for that time in your life. And if you can remember that, you'll be bucks ahead, way, way, way ahead in your investment. And people that try to outsmart the market get burned all the time, and I see that a lot. I'll see a person that gets out when it's down and gets back in when it's up. And it's really hard to make both of those decisions. So that's all I want to say about that. Whoops, this thing has a hair trigger. So monitor your plan. You want to be sure that you're sticking with your guns. Rebalancing is something that you should do periodically to make sure that your portfolio is still what you wanted it to be when you started. If you think about it, if you're holding stocks and bonds, some of them are going to do better and worse in different economic cycles. So if you started out with 80-20, you might end up with 75-25 because the bonds have outperformed the stocks. And so you want to get that back in balance by selling low, the stuff that's performed better, and buying some of the stuff that's performed worse. So you're selling low and buying, let's see, did I say that right? Selling low, buying high, right? That's what you're supposed to do. No, buy high. Buy high and sell low. You're selling stuff that's performing worse, and you got it, right? Buy low, sell high. Back that tape up, will you? Let's do that. Let's have an instant replay on that. Make changes for the right reasons. There's some tax implications for selling. It has to do with capital gains tax mostly on long-term investments. And some good personal help to figure that out as well. Sounds like I'm making this really complicated, and I fear that making a presentation like this will scare some of you away. You'll think, how can I possibly do this on my own? And it seems like kind of a daunting task. But if you get some help from somebody, if you take some personal finance classes, and I recommend that you learn something about personal finance at this stage of your life, because it's not likely that you will later on. And there's just this vast amount of illiteracy among people that are trying to invest and save money. If you learn some of that, and you learn a little bit about what I call the balanced funds or asset allocation funds in retirement, and how to invest that way, it's not as hard as you might think. here's a little case study. It's a guy named Johnny, 25 years old. He's married with one child. He's got a new job. He's just right out of BYU. He's only making $36,000 a year. And he gets $30,000 a year net, or about $2,500 a month. He has a 401k, he gets a 3% match in that. And he's saving 10%. Okay? So there's his goals. He wants an emergency fund, he wants to save for a house, then his retirement, then his child's education. Okay? So what he does, first of all, he saves $7,500, in his emergency fund. It takes him 5 years to get there, but he saves $100 a month. He gets 3% interest on that, and then he adds his initial, I guess, $1,000 investment. I'm not sure exactly how that works out, but he has his investment in his money market, in his emergency fund in 5 years. Goal number 2, he wants to save for a down payment on his house. He wants to save $10,000, and he wants to get there in 7 years. So he saves $100 a month at 4% for 7 years, and he has just a little shy of his goal in 7 years. Now, that's saving 10% of his income. Okay. If he saves 15%, it can go to the third goal. This is he wants $1 million in retirement savings in 40 years. So he sets aside he contributes $196 to his 401k plan, and he gets a $90 match, or $286 a month that's invested. So he's I'm not sure what his contribution rate is. He's getting a 3% match, so he's maybe putting in 6 or 7% or something like that. And so at 8%, because he's investing longer term in that account, he's investing 80% stock, 20% bonds over a 40-year horizon. He's got $1 million in 40 years. And that's how you get there, and you'll need $1 million probably, or more, when you retire for your savings. But that's how you do it. So it's not that impossible. People think, well, how can I ever have $1 million? But you get there slowly, systematically, methodically, and that's how you get that. And then the last is saving for his kids. Now he's got to save 20%. He's got to have $65,000 in education savings in 18 years, and you'll see how it gets there. So that's the module. In summary, we've talked about financial perspectives, the spiritual matters, important to be financially independent if you can when you're fairly young. Investment basics, we've talked about that. We talked about the steps. And on this personal finance website, there are a lot of examples and things that you can read, and suggestions for family home evening and things that I would really encourage you to look at. And I think that's just such a great resource. Now, so I'm out of time. It's 25 after. We're going to take a 10-minute break. Let's have the mentors come down and ask. You can ask them questions. I'm here to ask questions too if you want to, and we'll start again at about 25 to. Thanks very much.